Sir, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Shall I start, sir?
You can write second year now. Okay.
Good afternoon, one and all. Today I am going to talk about biomarkers in heart failure. So, biomarkers they play a major role in OPD basis or in the hospital admissions with regard to the heart failure, whether to admit the patient or we can treat him OPD basis, and they can also prognosticate the diagnosed patient. So the biomarker testing, first it was done by Braunwald et al. It dates back to several decades. Initially, they were used C-reactive protein assay as the biomarker to diagnose the heart failure. So here the biomarker the development of heart failure involves various mechanisms like neurohormonal activation, inflammation, and myocardial stretch or myocardial insult, along with oxidative stress. All these mechanisms, they play a major role in the development along with the progression of heart failure. So according to that, the biomarkers are also categorized. So coming to the definition of biomarker, two institutes like initially in 1998, National Institute of Health Biomarkers Working Group, they define the biomarker as a characteristic that is objectively measured and evaluated as an indicator of normal biological processes, pathogenic processes, or pharmacological responses to a therapeutic intervention. And WHO defined a biomarker as any substance, structure, or process that can be measured in the body or its products and can influence or predict the incidence of outcome or disease. And for a heart failure biomarker, in order to be useful, it should possess certain qualities. The method by which it is measured, it should be thorough and robust, and it should reflect an important pathophysiological pathway involved in the development of heart failure, and it should provide the information other than basic routine, other than the information that we got from physical examination and lab evaluation. And it should also add to the clinical judgment for understanding the diagnosis, prognosis, and management of heart failure. And the biomarkers, it provides a low cost, low risk, and quick turnaround time and method to confirm or exclude a heart failure diagnosis. And it also helpful to establish the prognosis of heart failure. And it also provide the substantial information on the complex pathophysiology that involved in the development and progression of heart failure. So as we earlier said, heart failure development involves various pathophysiological pathways. Accordingly, biomarkers were also categorized. Among them, the myocardial insult markers, which includes both myocardial stretch, myocardial necrosis, and oxidative stress. Whereas neurohormonal activation markers and myocardial remodeling markers, which includes extracellular matrix remodeling markers, and biomarkers of comorbidity, which includes the renal, inflammatory markers and renal injury markers. As apart from the heart failure, the effects of heart failure, it also depends on the involvement of various other organs, mostly renal involvement. So this is the pictorial diagram showing all the pathophysiological pathway along with the concerned biomarkers. starting from myocardial stretch to renal dysfunction markers. Coming to myocardial
So you
stretch,
put that,
sir,
so you can say that the headline myocardial stretch, matrix
matrix
remodeling,
remodeling,
myocyte injury, then oxidative stress,
oxidative stress,
inflammation.
inflammation,
These
neurohormonal
are all related to muscle only.
muscle, yes, sir.
Neurohormonal is a
Sympathetic,
hormonal one,
yes, sir.
and renal
And renal
dysfunction is
dysfunction,
real.
renal injury markers.
So now this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are myocardial
Myocardial,
element, and one is neurohormonal,
and
one is renal.
renal
So myocardial stretch, remodeling, injury,
injury, oxidative
oxidative stress, and inflammation.
inflammation.
Then you can mention one by one about that.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Coming to myocardial stretch biomarkers, which includes brain natriuretic peptide and N-amino terminal pro-BNP. These are the most commonly used biomarkers, and the left ventricle wall stress is the most potent trigger for the release of natriuretic peptides. So on induction of the BNP gene, a 134 propeptide precursor, it is processed to release the 26 amino acid prepeptide to yield the pro-BNP. These pro-BNP values, they were very much less in the normal individuals, and because of action of proteases like chorin or furin, pro-BNP is cleaved in the cardiomyocyte or in peripheral sites into biologically active brain natriuretic peptide and NT-proBNP. And BNP, it binds to three receptors, natriuretic peptide receptor A, B, and C. Among these three, the biological effects of BNP is induced by binding to natriuretic peptide receptor A and B. The biological effects include diuresis, natriuresis, vasodilation, improved lucitropy, that's relaxation, and reduced cardiovascular hypertrophy and fibrosis.
What is lucitropy?
Myocardial relaxation.
This is the diastolic function. Inotropy is the systolic function. Luciotropy is this diastolic function.
And on binding to natriuretic peptide receptor, it degrades the brain natriuretic peptide. So the degradation of brain natriuretic peptide is done by the peptide receptor C, and also by various enzymes like neprilysin, neutral endopeptidase, and passively it is cleared by renal filtration. Coming to NT-proBNP, it is mainly cleared passively by the renal filtration. So because of this, the BNP has shorter half-life when compared to NT-proBNP, because it is cleared by both active and passive clearance. BNP has both active and passive clearance. It is having shorter half-life. And BNP and NT-proBNP, they are useful for diagnosis and for prognostication purposes, and also in the management of heart failure. So for diagnosis, increased concentrations of BNP and NT-proBNP were seen in conditions with acute decompensated heart failure. So it is elicited by various studies like multivariable logistic regressional analysis of a multinational study which included around 1500 patients. That is a breathing not properly study. They in that study, those patients with acute decompensated heart failure has increased concentrations of BNP values. So they made a cutoff of BNP of 100 picogram per ml. So the for diagnosis of acute decompensated heart failure. So the sensitivity of this value is 90% and specificity is 76%, and it is 85% accurate in diagnosing ADHF. As per BNP, the NT-proBNP concentrations were also elevated in ADHF, which is studied in PRIDE study. So they demonstrated that the patients with acute decompensated heart failure, they have significantly higher NT-proBNP levels. So the rising NT-proBNP concentration, they correlated with the increasing severity of heart failure. As such, it also It is a strongest predictor of acute decompensated heart failure diagnosis. And the cutoff value for NT-proBNP is 9. It should be less than 900 picogram per ml. More than that is a diagnostic for heart failure. So, ICON study. The researchers in this study were the first to report the age stratification of NT-proBNP values. So, in order to increase the accuracy, increase the diagnostic performance of NT-proBNP, they made the age stratification. With for ages less than 50, the cutoff is 450, 50 to 75, 900, and for the people with more than 75 years of age, the cutoff is 1800 picogram per ml. This ICON study, they also demonstrated that NT-proBNP has also the diagnostic in case of in ambulatory patients, that is outpatient basis, for chronic heart failure patients. For prognostication purpose, the data from ADHF National Registry, which included 48,000 patients admitted with acute decompensated heart failure. In this study, they demonstrated that the higher admission BNP values is associated with increased in-hospital mortality. And they also observed that there is a linear relationship between the increasing levels of BNP and in-hospital mortality. So the results were similar with NT-proBNP also. So for prognosis, compared to admission values, the pre-discharge values were very much prognostic when compared to the admission values. So the serial measurement of biomarkers is required. So the pre-discharge values after decongestion, after treatment, they are even more prognostic for future mortality and rehospitalization with heart failure. So the recent guidelines, they have given class 2A recommendation for remeasurement of BNP or NT-proBNP at discharge for such risk stratification. Along with the acute decompensated heart failure, apart from this, the NT-proBNP is also useful for diagnosis of outpatient basis in case of chronic heart failure. So it is elicited by Valsartan heart failure trial study. In this, the NT-proBNP value is measured at the baseline and after 4 months. The serial measurement provided the incremental data on likelihood for adverse outcome in ambulatory patients with chronic heart failure. And it also identified patients at risk for LV remodeling. So for chronic heart failure and with patients with acute decompensated heart failure, apart from this, the BNP and NT-proBNP, they are also useful to predict the heart failure risk in those individuals who are asymptomatic and who doesn't develop heart failure. So it is elicited from Framingham Offspring study, which included 3,300 asymptomatic patients without heart failure. And among them, the patients with baseline increased concentrations of BNP or NT-proBNP, they are predicted to have higher chances of all-cause mortality and first major cardiovascular event and development of heart failure, atrial fibrillation, and stroke or transient ischemic attack. So the BNP levels above 80th percentile, which is around 20 for male and 23 for female. So they have those patients have 62% increase in the risk of death, 76% increase in first cardiovascular event, and 307% increase in chances in development of heart failure. As such, with NT-proBNP levels above 80th percentile have a 76% increase in the risk of death, 52% increase in the risk of first cardiovascular event, and 502% increase in the risk of heart failure. So here basically in normal health, I mean normal individuals, women have higher BNP NT-proBNP values when compared to men because of the effect of sex hormones on the BNP gene. Apart from diagnosis and prognosis, BNP NT-proBNP also useful in the management of heart failure. We have to do serial measurement of these biomarkers during hospitalization period. Whether it is an increasing trend or decreasing trend, we have to observe. So with most guideline directed medical therapies, most of the patients benefit with heart failure. The therapies include ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, aldosterone antagonists, and cardiac resynchronization therapy. These therapies, they reduce BNP or NT-proBNP concentrations after their initiation or up titration of the dosages. So those patients whose guideline directed medical therapies is titrated with even though after titration they are showing persistent elevation and no response in BNP or NT-proBNP concentrations, they have persistently worse outcomes. So these are the various conditions where BNP or NT-proBNP concentrations are elevated and decreased. The factors that decrease BNP or NT-proBNP concentrations were obesity, flash pulmonary edema, cardiac tamponade, pericardial constriction. Obesity, there is a decrease in, decrease in the synthesis or release of the BNP or NT-proBNP values. Whereas the factors which increase the BNP or NT-proBNP concentrations were, most of them were cardiac conditions like left
pulmonary edema.
So flash pulmonary edema.
Flash.
I could not find the reasons here for a decrease in BNP.
Huh?
Don't know the reasons sir, for why the BNP concentration is reduced in that.
Not, I think it may not increase.
Sir.
Or little decrease can occur.
Okay.
See, flash pulmonary edema, what are the causes?
Renal artery stenosis.
Acute hypertension, whatever may be the cause, sudden rise in blood pressure can produce acute pulmonary edema. No, previously 30-40 years back, we used to get patients with hypertension, with pulmonary edema, and classical pink frothy sputum, and once you control the blood pressure, after a few hours they used to settle down like that. So, and among that hypertension, one is the renovascular hypertension, secondary, that's, but that type of patients are very minimal. Most of the other patients are uncontrolled hypertension. So probably in them, I feel that see what is the brain, mainly BNP is related to the stretch receptors, volume receptors.
Sir.
It is dependent upon the left ventricular, right ventricular volume. If volume is increasing, the BNP release will increase, which occurs usually in heart failure.
Sir.
What is the atrial natriuretic peptide? When it will rise?
It will also increase in the heart failure conditions, sir.
When?
Dilated when.
No, when it is more of a stretch. Huh?
Yes, sir.
I think probably in hypertension you may not have much of stretch is there, but probably acute hypertension, there's not much of a dilatation, all those things. That's why probably it is there. I don't know. Probably that may be explanation. You have to look for that. Yes, why it is not elevated. Okay.
And, various factors that increase BNP concentrations were left LV dysfunction and hypertrophic heart muscle disease like cardiomyopathies with increased cardiac muscle, arrhythmias, acute coronary syndromes, ischemia, and cardiotoxic drugs like anthracyclines and related compounds, and various pulmonary diseases like ARDS, right heart failure, lung disease with right heart failure, obstructive sleep apnea, pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary embolism, advanced age, renal dysfunction, anemia, and burns, stroke, and various high output states like sepsis, cirrhosis, and hypothyroidism. Here the renal dysfunction, as the BNP and NT-proBNP should be cleared by renal filtration. The renal dysfunction with eGFR less than 30, that is severe or moderate to severe CKD patients, there will be increased accumulation of these peptides, in those patients, the cutoff values will be altered. With a BNP around 300 and NT-proBNP around 1200. We have to take those cutoff values to diagnose heart failure in patients. So the another biomarker is
Actually, actually, I had one of my friend's wife. She had a adrenomycin cardiomyopathy. Her BNP was nearly 9,000 or 10,000. So then when I talked to Krishnamraj, he said, Sampath, I've seen patients who had nearly 12,000 BNP like that. That 12,005. So that means, I think after 2,000 or 1,500, it comes under high risk, I think.
high
Like
risk.
that. If more than 1,000 or 1,500 is there, that means they are having a high risk of long-term mortality is very high like that. But this is the only patient where I saw nearly 9,000 BNP. Okay.
And the other biomarker is emerging. There's a mid-regional propeptide, proatrial natriuretic peptide. So the levels of
ANP increase with cardiac stretch.
Cardiac stretch. Yes.
BNP mainly increases with dilatation. That is also stretch, but more of a dilatation.
Dilatation. Okay. Sir.
Here with the tension also, tension. Whenever the right ventricle or left ventricular tension increases, release of ANP will be there. Okay, both are interdependent, stretch and tension.
Sir.
So mostly volume and tension, both are in the early stages, only tension. After some time, dilatation occurs, tension also increases as per the Laplace law. Okay.
So the levels of atrial natriuretic peptide, they increase with the cardiac stretch. And the half-life of ANP is 2 to 5 minutes. Because of this short half-life, its measurement is difficult. So the precursor, there's a propeptide, proatrial natriuretic peptide, is the immediate precursor of atrial natriuretic peptide. It is stable and it has a longer half-life. So it is useful for the measurement. So this mid-regional propeptide is examined for the diagnosis of heart failure. In back, and it is performed well in diagnosing acute decompensated heart failure. And the cutoff value for pro-ANP is 120 picomoles per liter, and its sensitivity is around 97% and with 60% specificity, and it has 74% accuracy in the diagnosis of acute decompensated heart failure. Whereas in chronic heart failure, I mean, the efficacy of diagnosis of chronic heart failure is examined by GISSI heart failure study, and the value more than 278 picomole per liter, it had prognostic accuracy for 4-year mortality in patients with chronic heart failure. The various cutoff values for
okay, I think you remember what is the upper limit, and then more than that will be
for diagnosis. BNP it should be more than 100 picogram per milliliter. NT-proBNP it should be more than 900, and mid-regional pro-ANP it should be more than 127 picomole per liter for diagnosis. Coming to other class, myocardial necrosis biomarkers, which includes high sensitivity troponin assays. So the troponin concentrations were elevated in both acute decompensated heart failure and chronic heart failure. Multiple mechanisms for release of these troponins include subendocardial stress, myocyte degeneration, and toxic effects of non-cardiovascular disorders like renal failure. So in the there will be a left ventricular hypertrophy will be seen along with the volume overload in case of renal failure patients. So the elevated levels of troponin, they are prognostic for the adverse outcomes, which is in a study of 202 patients, with acute decompensated heart failure, and these patients, they didn't have met the criteria for acute MI. In those patients, the troponin, high sensitivity
So
troponin.
what is the recent definition of MI by WHO? Sandeep, what are the three things they have included? Diagnosis of MI.
Symptoms,
Huh?
symptoms and troponin values, along with angiographic assessment, sir.
Not angiogram. You don't do diagnosis thing angiogram. See, the most important is symptom, electrocardiogram, and
ECG and
troponin.
troponin.
Initially, it was CPK MB was there.
Sir.
Now that they have taken it out and included now the troponin as a biomarker to diagnose acute ischemia and necrosis like that, acute MI. So out of 3, minimum 2 should be there. Actually, we have both the electrocardiogram and history. So biomarkers also we get it done, but before that you can diagnose. Electrocardiogram gives nearly 60% of the patient positivity, but rarely 10 to 20, 30% you still can have a normal or very minor changes which you may not be able to detect. That's why correlate with other things and more important clinical situations.
So, in a study with 202 patients having acute decompensated heart failure without acute MI, in those patients, high sensitivity troponin was detected in 98% of patients. And the cutoff value for high sensitive troponin more than 20 nanograms per liter, it identified as a significant higher risk for death.
In a heart failure patient, not in acute MI.
Not acute MI, heart failure patient.
Oh.
And coming to oxidative stress biomarkers, is myeloperoxidase. It is released from activated neutrophils and monocytes during inflammatory phase, and it is produced in endothelial cells in response to oxidative stress and contributes to the vascular inflammation and depletion of vascular nitric oxide. So in patients with heart failure, acute decompensated heart failure, Reichlin et al., they demonstrated that MPO values more than 99 picomole per liter, they were associated with significant increase in the 1-year mortality. Uric acid, it is a marker of cell stress. Elevated levels, they predict the onset of heart failure. And it is observed from Framingham Offspring study, which included 4,900 unaffected patients. The incident rates of heart failure were 6-fold higher in those patients who are having higher levels of uric acid, that is more than 6.3 mg per deciliter. And that treatment with the uricosuric agents like allopurinol, probenecid, they didn't reverse this effect.
What is the drawback of uric acid as a marker for heart failure? No, they found out that epidemiologically and said that probably, but clinically it may be very unreliable. Why?
In renal, most of the heart failure patients, they develop renal failure.
Yeah, renal failure will not raise uric acid. See, uric acid is from the protein synthesis, not purine synthesis like that. So most of the time, many of our drugs we give for heart hypertension, those things like thiazide diuretics, all cause hyperuricemia. So a simple hypertensive patient who is on a thiazide diuretic with some vasodilator like that, he may have raised a little uric acid. So that may not be predictive of a heart failure onset or like that. This is a common. So that's why I think it is a, see, they have found out, but you have to take out all those exceptions like patient is not on diuretics and patient is not taking little high protein diet, all those things like that.
Okay.
No, you have to mention, I'm not exam, but
Sir.
you have to think that clinically applicability is a little tough.
Yes. And
Okay.
other biomarkers like of neurohormonal activation is sympathetic system activity, like norepinephrine. So early studies in patients with left ventricular dysfunction demonstrated that the plasma norepinephrine levels above 393 picogram per ml with associated with increased cardiovascular risk. And in a more contemporary and complex analysis of novel and established biomarkers, as well as the Seattle heart failure model, they added norepinephrine to the heart failure model, and they demonstrated that addition of this norepinephrine did not improve the prediction of mortality. And they also noted that there is a paradoxical decline in myocardial concentration of norepinephrine as heart failure progresses. Other biomarker
Why?
is adrenomedulin. Adrenomedulin, it is an endogenous vasodilator and it is elevated in patients with chronic heart failure and in those with diastolic LV dysfunction and with restrictive filling. And it also increases, the levels will increase in the heart failure severity. And as adrenomedulin is having shorter half-life and which is difficult to measure, mid-regional propeptide adrenomedulin is developed for measurement. And a study done by Shah et al. Demonstrated that this mid-regional pro-ADM was higher in patients with acute decompensated heart failure, and it remained as an independent predictor of heart failure diagnosis. Although this mid-regional peptide is rather prognostic, its fundamental biology is poorly understood and it lacks specificity for heart failure diagnosis because of its expression in multiple tissues. Other markers were arginine vasopressin and copeptin. Arginine vasopressin, it is an antidiuretic and vasoconstrictive hormone released from the hypothalamus in response to altered plasma osmolality and hypovolemia. And the concentration of these markers are elevated in patients with severe heart failure. Direct measurement of arginine vasopressin is difficult as it is unstable. Hence, the C-terminal segment of provasopressin, that is copeptin, is used as a surrogate for measurement. And it is a predictive of cardiovascular outcomes in patients with chronic heart failure. And its efficacy is studied by Maisel et al. They they included 557 patients with acute decompensated heart failure. They taken from back trial. So in those patients with copeptin concentrations in the highest quartile, that is increase in concentration, they had increased 90-day mortality. And endothelin 1, it is produced by the endothelium in response to inflammation, neurohormonal activation, and vascular stress. Endothelin 1 causes vasoconstriction and pro-inflammatory actions and proliferative effects and stimulation of free radical formation. Tang et al. Demonstrated that higher concentrations of endothelin 1 is associated with worse left ventricular diastolic performance and worse clinical outcomes in patients with heart failure reduced ejection fraction. Other class biomarkers include myocardial remodeling markers, that is hypertrophy or fibrosis biomarkers, that is ST2. ST2, it is a protein member of interleukin-1 receptor family that is released under conditions of myocardial and vascular strain. It has two isoforms. There's a
ST2, what is the explanation?
Suppression of tumorigenesis.
Huh?
Suppression of tumorigenesis ligands.
Suppression of
Tumorigenesis.
tumorigenesis. Oh, suppressive tumorigenesis. Okay.
Sir, they have two isoforms. There's a transmembrane ligand, that is ST2 ligand, and a soluble component, that is soluble ST2. It plays an essential role in mediating myocardial and vascular remodeling and fibrosis, early atherosclerosis, and hypertension. The ligand for ST2 is interleukin 33. It is a member of interleukin 1 superfamily of cytokines, and it is expressed in epithelial and endothelial cells. The biological effects of interleukin 33 were reduction in programmed cell death, that is reduction in apoptosis, and downregulation of profibrotic pathways. So the soluble ST2, it acts as a decoy receptor for interleukin 33, and it prevents the biological effects of interleukin 33, and it prevents by preventing the preventing binding to ST2 ligand. So that it leads to a state favoring myocardial cell death and ventricular fibrosis and remodeling. Hence, the concentrations of soluble ST2, they have strong prognostic value in both acute and chronic heart failure. As this soluble ST2, it is more favorable to cardiac fibrosis and myocardial cell death. Increased concentrations have prognostic value in both acute and chronic heart failure. It is elicited in PRIDE study. That is, in this study, they demonstrated that elevated soluble ST2 concentrations, they strongly predicted 1-year mortality in dyspneic patients as well as in those with acute decompensated heart failure. Along with that, the ability of soluble ST2 to predict risk is similar in those with heart failure preserved ejection fraction and those with reduced ejection fraction. And the accuracy of soluble ST2 concentration is not undermined by obesity, age, atrial fibrillation, or renal function. The serial measurements of soluble ST2, they are more useful than a single measurement for prognostic purposes. In acute decompensated heart failure, serial measurements is better discriminated the risk for mortality. Similarly, in ambulatory heart failure setting, the serial concentrations of soluble ST2, they predict worsening of heart failure, rehospitalization, heart transplantation, and death when compared to BNP or NT-proBNP values. So recent guidelines, they given soluble ST2 as a class 2 recommendation for risk prediction in heart failure. And galactin-3, it is a macrophage lectin product that plays a role in cascade of events leading to tissue fibrosis. And it is elicited in PRIDE study that
this PRIDE study, all are there. This galactin and ST2, adrenomedlin, and BNP was also there.
BNP was also.
So you remember that PRIDE study? Anything you write PRIDE study.
The pro-BNP investigation of dyspnea.
Same. I told that's why in all the studies it is there. Okay.
So in PRIDE study, they demonstrated that in patients with acute decompensated heart failure, galactin-3 concentrations is strongly predictive of 60-day mortality or the combination of death or recurrent heart failure within 60 days. Combination of NT-proBNP with galactin-3 has better predictor of mortality when compared to either biomarker alone. So the galactin-3 testing, it received a class 2 recommendation in ACC, AHA, or Heart Failure Society of America Heart Failure Guidelines for risk prediction in heart failure. Extracellular matrix remodeling biomarkers like matrix metalloproteinase, tissue inhibitors of metalloproteinases. The remodeling, it takes place in part through degradation of collagen and other matrix proteins by collagenases, matrix metalloproteinases, and it is mediated by tissue inhibitors of metalloproteinases. The imbalance between matrix metalloproteinase and tissue inhibitors, it leads to fibrosis and ventricular remodeling. George et al. Demonstrated that MMP2 concentrations were an independent predictor of mortality in patients with heart failure. MMP2, 8, 9, 2, 6, 9 are the various matrix metalloproteinases tested for heart failure. Among them, MMP2 concentrations have demonstrated as independent predictor of mortality. Burali et al. They demonstrated that MMP3 and 9 were univariate predictors of all-cause mortality in patients with heart failure reduced ejection fraction. In patients with preserved ejection fraction, a multi-biomarker panel, including MMP2, tissue inhibitor matrix proteinase 4, pro-collagen type 3 amino terminal peptide, and decreasing concentration of MMP8, they predicted the presence of heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Other biomarker is microRNA, it's emerging biomarker. So it is a small non-coding RNA molecule that is closely involved in transcriptional and post-transcriptional regulation of gene expression. Biomarker, that is microRNA 423, was most strongly diagnostic of heart failure and closely linked with heart failure severity, include ejection fraction and NIHA classification. And two of the identified microRNAs, microRNA 499 and microRNA 423, they changed in response to therapy that improved measures of cardiac remodeling and survival. The apoptosis biomarkers include growth differentiation factor, GDF15. It regulates inflammatory and apoptotic pathways by inhibiting macrophage activation. It is not only specific to cardiac myocytes, but it is also found in wide range of tissues under stressful conditions. Increased concentrations of GDF15 predicted the greater risk of 60-day mortality in heart failure, renal failure, rehospitalization or cardiovascular death, and cardiovascular death at 180 days. It is associated with an adverse prognosis in patients with chronic heart failure. Other biomarker like insulin-like growth factor binding protein 7, it leads to cell cycle arrest and tissue fibrosis, and the concentrations are significantly associated with myocardial diastolic abnormalities. Gandhi et al. First reported in patients with heart failure reduced ejection fraction, the concentrations of this biomarker, it is correlated with left atrial volume index, transmitral E by A ratio, E by E prime ratio, and right ventricular systolic pressure. Concentrations of this marker is also independently prognostic of death in patients with heart failure reduced ejection fraction along with the preserved ejection fraction. Coming to biomarkers of comorbidity, inflammatory biomarkers, circulating levels of tumor necrosis factor, soluble TNF receptors, IL-6 concentrations were obtained in patients with chronic heart failure and found to be associated with increased risk of mortality.
Now in this COVID also IL-6 only elevated, na?
Elevated, sir. In patients without any cardiovascular disease, IL-6 and TNF alpha were significantly and independently associated with incident heart failure. Renal function biomarkers, serum creatinine, estimated GFR, or blood urea nitrogens are important predictors of outcome in patients with heart failure. eGFR is shown to be additive to natriuretic peptides for predicting adverse clinical outcomes. The combination of NT-proBNP and eGFR it predicts outcomes better in patients with acute decompensated heart failure. For prognostication in heart failure, cystatin C has been consistently shown to be superior to creatinine. Renal injury biomarkers include neutrophil gelatinase associated lipocalin NGAL, kidney injury molecule 1, N-acetyl beta glucosaminidase NAG, liver type fatty acid binding protein, interleukin 18, and the ratio of urinary tissue inhibitor metalloproteinase 2 and insulin growth factor BP7. These are the various renal injury biomarkers. Among them, concentrations of NGAL are elevated in patients with acute decompensated heart failure, and it is also useful for prognosticating the onset of renal dysfunction in patients with heart failure. The value of NGAL more than 167 nanogram per ml is associated with 2.7-fold increase in the risk of death and 2.9-fold increased risk of death or hospitalization. Kidney injury molecule 1, it is a glycoprotein expressed in the proximal tubule. In patients with chronic heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, urinary KM1 concentrations, it is reported to be higher than in those without heart failure, and it also correlates with left ventricular ejection fraction and NIHA functional class. In GC HF trial, including 2,100 patients, NGAL, KM1, NAG, they were independently associated with combined endpoint of all-cause mortality and heart failure hospitalizations. And other markers are liver function test and serum albumin. The low serum albumin of less than 3.4 gram per deciliter is common in patients with heart failure, which is due to protein.
Probably that is a cachexia stage, which is cardiac cachexia. At that time, albumin, all proteins, everything is gone like that.
Yes, sir. Because of protein loss from enteral congestion to right heart failure. So both abnormal LFTs and hypoalbuminemia are independently prognostic.
Actually, I have seen my experience is rise in serum bilirubin by more than 2-3 milligrams is a very grave prognosis. I have not seen patients living more than 6 months. Patients who are heart failure with a bilirubin rise.
Okay.
That means liver is so much damaged, so that means it's an end stage heart failure. Okay.
The guidelines recommendations 2017 ACC guideline recommendations for biomarkers in management of heart failure include the BNP or NT-proBNP received a class 1 recommendation for diagnostic and prognostic purposes along with troponin T or troponin I. It has a class 1 recommendation for hospital admission purpose along with prognostic purposes.
I put that.
So,
See, hospital discharge, prognosis, guided
program,
therapy,
class 2.
prevention.
Yes, sir.
How it is going to help in prevention?
No, sir. It's a class.
Yeah, see, if a patient has some valvular lesion or acute MI like that, if there's a slight rise in BNP, you have to be careful and see that you investigate them and give a definitive management like that, like angiogram, angioplasty, surgery, all those things. So in the prevention of heart failure,
Sir.
these are the things. So like that patient, ischemic heart disease, you investigate him and see treatable causes like relief, ischemia, and all those things which are going to have a long-term morbidity, mortality. Like that, prevention is by same thing. If there's a BNP is elevated, even though echo looks all right, then better you investigate and see that any preventive thing can be done. Okay.
To summarize, biomarkers that helpful in pathogenesis of heart failure or myocyte injury markers, neurohormonal, extracellular matrix remodeling markers, inflammatory and oxidative stress markers. And all these markers, they are also like inflammatory, neurohormonal, myocyte injury and myocyte stress markers are also helpful in prognosticating and enhancing the risk stratification. And myocyte stress and inflammatory markers, they identify the patients who are at risk for heart failure. And therapeutic purpose, myocyte stress, myocyte injury, neurohormonal and oxidative stress markers, they are helpful for guiding the management or therapeutic purposes.
What are the drugs we are using for neurohormonal this one?
Neurohormonal.
Heart failure, Babu.
AC, ARBs, beta blocker.
The ARBs, AC inhibitors, beta blockers also, they reduce renin levels, all those things. So all these drugs are a neurohormonal modulation.
Okay, sir.
See, this is a simple day-to-day one, but if asked specifically, you are not. So the mechanism of action is mainly neurohormonal. That is, see, aldosterone, renin, angiotensin axis. See,
Yes, sir.
all, so
RAS,
all
RAS
these
blocker.
see, all are in the similar pathway, and they're all controlled by the same pathophysiology. The neurohormonal alterations are ARBs, AC inhibitors, and
inhibitor,
beta
beta
blockers.
blockers.
Okay.
And myocyte stress markers, they are helpful in the diagnostic and in monitoring the therapy.
So for myocyte stress or injury, what are the things you can give drugs?
Myocyte stress, BN.
So anyhow, ischemia is there, you relieve it. Hypertension is there, you control it. But nowadays they are aiming that inflammation, myocardial site injury can be given by some of the studies have come that colchicine can be used. All those things are coming. Still they are in trials, but now they are trying in therapy of colchicine to reduce acute inflammation and myocardial injury, myocyte injury. Even in COVID also they tried colchicine. That's mainly for inflammation and okay.
Mm. So this is the chart showing, this is the algorithm showing the usage of biomarkers at various levels. So I mean, in patients classified as four groups, four stages, stage A, B, C, D. Stage A include those patients without any structural heart disease and without any symptoms, that normal patients. Stage B, patients with a structural heart disease but without any symptoms. Stage C, patients with structural heart disease and who are symptomatic. Stage D, who are on mechanical circulatory support. Based on, these are the various classifications of patients with heart failure. If the patient is in stage A or stage B, those at risk for heart failure, and we have to measure BNP or pro-BNP levels for preventive purposes. Whereas in case of patients with a stage C or D who came to ED with a new onset dyspnea, there for diagnosis, BNP or NT-proBNP values are useful. Those,
Prognosis also.
sir?
Prognosis also.
Prognosis, for prognostic purposes also is useful. And those patients with NIHA class 2 to 4, NT-proBNP are useful for diagnostic purposes and prognostic purposes. Along with that, various other biomarkers of myocardial injury or fibrosis, it is a class 2 3B recommendation for prognosis or risk stratification in these patients. Whereas patients with presented with acute decompensated heart failure who are hospitalized, for diagnostic and prognostic purposes, BNP or NT-proBNP or troponin values were useful. The class 1 indication, whereas in hospitalized patients, the pre-discharge BNP or NT-proBNP values are useful for prognostication. It is a class 2A indication. And along with that, myocardial injury or fibrotic biomarkers holds class B indication. Thank you.
So recently, Raju, in NIMS, they asked this question, heart failure, clinical staging and like that.
Sir, 4 stages, sir. Stage A, B, C, D. Stage A, patients who are not symptomatic and who doesn't have structural heart disease.
Okay.
Stage
At
B,
risk for heart failure. Stage A.
Okay.
at risk for heart failure. Stage
Okay.
Stage B, those who have structural heart disease but without any symptoms.
And that same NIHA like that only.
Like that, yes, sir.
I forgot that name. Depending upon the heart failure, clinical staging,
Yes, sir.
clinical assessment. What is that, Raju? You know that?
Phillips classification, sir.
Not Phillips is for acute MI.
Sir, based on the symptoms of congestion and the
Ah,
periphery is warm or cold.
that's
If the
what.
perfusion is good, it will be called as warm, sir. If the perfusion is low, it will be called as cold. And if there is congestion, they will call it as wet. If there is no congestion or edema, they will call it as dry.
That is what clinically. So, are the patient who is having a waterlogging state and this one are patients who are dry, no waterlogging, but the patients having the heart failure. So, like that treatment also, these patients who are having a waterlogging state, you have to give diuretics, all those things. Patients who don't have much of waterlogging, you don't require to give them diuretics much, but more of a vasodilators and ACE inhibitors, those things like that. So that is the clinical classification for management purposes. Mainly warm,
Cold.
dry, warm, wet, cold, wet.
Cold.
Cold and wet means a patient who is having a very severe cardiac output decrease and cold, clammy skin, all those things like that. Whereas the beriberi, all those things were waterlogging, but they are warm. Pulse volume is very good, all those things like that. High output states. Whereas patients with systolic dysfunctional classical heart failure, they're having waterlogging and not warm. They're a little cold only, low output state. So depending upon the clinical situation, you can choose either they require a diuretic or a vasodilator or require an inotropic drug. Same thing we used to, this was there in 40, 50 years back for acute MI. So you classify, after the advent of echocardiogram, that is gone. Otherwise, most of the patients sick patients used to put a Swan-Ganz catheter, measure the pulmonary wedge catheter, wedge pressure, which will give us the idea about the left atrium or left ventricular diastolic pressure. Also, you can measure cardiac output by thermodilution technique. Same catheter will have a tip, will have a thermodilution sensitive marker. So with that, you measure with the thermodilution, measure the cardiac output. And depending upon that, you manage the patients as patients who have normal cardiac output and normal pulmonary blood pressure. They're all uncomplicated normal patients. Patients who have elevated pulmonary capillary pressures are patients with pulmonary edema like that. Whereas cardiogenic shock patients will have both rise in pulmonary endoscopic pressure, pulmonary arterial wedge pressure, and also they have a low cardiac output. Cardiogenic shock. Then Phillips was a clinical. Class 1 is asymptomatic. Class 2 is mild symptoms where they have third heart sound and a 10% of the basal capitations. Class 3 is more basal like pulmonary edema. Class 4 is cardiogenic shock. So depending upon that, you can know the prognosis also like that. So in that way, at that time, even X-ray was mandatory 40 years back because we never had an echo. So clinically, it meant so from X-ray only, as I said, acute pulmonary venous hypertension, the stages of severity, like upper lobe become prominent, next is perihilar haze, third is alveolar rosetting, and fourth is frank pulmonary edema. You know that patient is in pulmonary edema. And anyhow, you have the cold, clammy skin, blood pressure, and urine output, and cerebral obtundation like disorientation and restlessness all indicate that cerebral hypoperfusion. That means you diagnose that they're in a cardiogenic shock. So like that. But now you see clinically, and now echocardiogram will give us a clear idea that what is the LV function. depending upon that, that whether patient is only having basal crepitations and LV dysfunction, you think is a class 3 like that. If the cardiac output is falling, means, oh, he has gone to cardiogenic shock, where you find that large muscle is damaged and large extensive antivolumi with akinesia of the entire septum affects all those things. So like that, echocardiogram has taken away all these modalities of evaluation, especially in acute MI. Otherwise, chest X-ray was mandatory as soon as a patient of MI admitted to know about the pulmonary status or pulmonary venous hypertension is there or not. So you
So
have
that
to
is
know about even Swan-Ganz catheter like that. Sometimes it may be asked as a short note. So what is that catheter? What is made up of? 3 ports are there. What are the structure of it and what is the usefulness of it in a clinical situation, especially mainly in the ICU settings, or even in a general medicine like that, a patient who's having a cough pulmonary like that, whether to know that he has really, now echo will give us LV function, but without echo means only with a wedge pressure measurements only you know that patient is having LV dysfunction or not. In that way, so sometimes it may be asked as a short notes, 10-mark question also. Swan-Ganz catheter, or previously it was asked as hemodynamic monitoring in acute MI. So hemodynamic monitoring means same, you measure the pulmonary arterial wedge pressure and cardiac output by thermodilution, same catheter, and then classify them depending upon that into 4 classes, like normal, where there is only elevated edge pressure and LV dysfunction, where the patient have more severe elevation, that is pulmonary edema, where the cardiac output is decreased and elevated pulmonary wedge pressure, that's cardiac shock.
so that is Forestier classification.
Huh? Forester,
Forester.
diamond and Forester. See, Swan-Ganz, diamond also is there, diamond and Forester. They are from the University of California, Stanford, I think. They were all at the same group, like. But this man, Swan-Ganz, only probably was the chief, I think. His name comes like that. Swan-Ganz, Forester, Diamond also is there in that 4 or 5 people group. What more? వస్తుంది అట్లా అవుతుంది 5 నిమిషం వచ్చింది. So I think some people, Aditya Bajaj, as I have seen his name, I think he's a DNB student in Medicity. I don't know where he has gone. They have taken out that course. Bajaj, you included Mastan or not added?
Are added, sir.
Okay. So I think you circulate to others also. We'll see whoever is interested will hear. What do you think? Huh?
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Some people are free and other things they may join. Okay, next week, Saturday, what is that?
Sir, you have sent on NEJM article, sir. Secondary mitral regurgitation.
Huh?
Mitral regurgitation, sir. Secondary mitral regurgitation.
That is a review article, I think.
Yes, sir. That's a
Fine.
review article. That
Okay.
will be taken, sir.
So then you talk about what is, briefly, it already discussed mitral valve operators. Just briefly mention,
Okay.
what are the components of mitral valve operators? What is
Yes.
primary mitral regurgitation? Then talk about secondary.
Yes.
So that briefly, that's about, and 2-3 slides about that mitral regurgitation. See, we discussed the seminar was done for mitral valve operators in detail, all those things. I
Yes, sir.
discussed acute MI, MRs, chronic MR, all those things. So just you can mention that and then go for secondary MR.
Yes, sir.
Now, this concept came only recently, 5 years like that. That's mainly in the management point of view. So primary MR, you can have some interventional surgical techniques to correct that. Whereas in secondary MR, I don't think you have any surgical techniques or other things to correct that. Huh? Except
Yes, sir.
some rare surgeries are there, like Batista procedure, those things are there, where they reduce the LV size or LV remodeling is decreased and like that. So that in that way, people said easily to, for management purposes, the Americans recently changed it to call primary and secondary. Okay.
Okay.
Secondary, you may have some intervention or surgery. Primary, it may be, oh, sorry, primary. Secondary, no, not much. Secondary, you can have palliatively, you can do some surgical techniques or AACDs, all those things like that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I think, shall we change the time to 3 o'clock?
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Or else, sir, we will make it as usual, sir. Morning 9 to 10.
Huh?
Morning 9 to 10, sir.
Okay.
Because at least 2 days, at least we will be early morning. We will start with the class.
Huh? I think mainly for the sake of others, we had the timing. We'll continue at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
If I have some work, I think we'll change it to 5:30 like that.
Okay, sir.
Huh?
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Or 5:36 is also no problem.
Yes.
No, sometimes I have to go out like that. That's why I said 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Last time I changed the timing now. I think you asked these two people to attend, Karthik and Sandeep. They know it? Mastan?
Sir,
Yes, sir. They are in the group, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir. They know it, sir.
You tell them.
Yes, sir.
No, now let them attend because they can add some points or subtract or otherwise it looks participation not there. Huh?
Yes, sir.
I told Bhopal also to join Bhopal. It may be some useful for the students, I said. He said, yes, sir, but I don't know. Anything about MCI, Raju?
No, sir. Not yet, sir.
Website is clean.
It's clean, sir. No.
No, sir, they come by I think some subjects, minimum no subject is given.
No, sir. Nothing is given, sir. Every monthly they keep it, sir.
Huh?
Every monthly they keep it, sir.
So this month, actually, probably this week or next week, they may have a meeting and like that, no? Or they may be busy with COVID. So they don't want to meet, I think.
No, sir. In MCI website, they are showing that MCI website is replaced by NMC.
NMC.
I know that that NMC is okay, but initially protocols will be same thing will be going on, na?
Yes, sir.
See,
But
that
there is
NMC
no
fellow will say, because he is a professor, a retired professor, AMC will say, hey, you continue for some more time, we'll farm our own bodies, all those things. You understand? That clerks,
Yes, sir.
everything will not change. You understand? See, when our university formed, then all the staff were Siddhartha Medical College only. Some of them were taken as deputation and like that. Finally, they were absorbed into university posting like that. That's why I know all of them like Ajay, Anuradha, everyone. Any work is there, just a ring up, they do that. So in that way, NMC cannot bring suddenly all this infrastructure, everything. Na? Same people will continue. Only it has changed. So anyhow, in that meeting, instead of that MCA board like that, same people will be there, one or two, and this fellow will add. The NMC, that fellow has taken chairman, but I don't know, he will not be knowing anything. Now, where is the room also, he will not be knowing. So other people have to guide. That happens in any organization. If Andhra Pradesh government changed, did everything change? No, only they came here, but the same people continued. Some people went there, some people came here, some new appointments like that. Even the protocols, they will have same thing for some more time. They may change a little, some masala or malish, they will put it so that it looks NMC. Otherwise, see, for Kakatiya University, Medical University started in Warangal, in Telangana. They download all the protocols of our NTR because that was the started 25 years back. It has large experience. Same thing as protocol. Instead of name have changed only. That's all. Whatever the rules, regulation, everything is same. Now also even the holidays also same. Sandeep, I don't think it's dramatically changed. It will come or see that depends up again the dynamicity of the chief. If that fellow is really dynamic, he wants to entirely revamp all those things, then he will start one by one. But they will not straight away start with administration and routine infrastructure work, because then it will be a lot of chaos will be there. They will first start something, and now anyhow exam is conducted by NBE, National Board of Examination. That's a completely different body. Just they'll coordinate with them and tell them like that. That's all. Then starting of the colleges and already start colleges recognition. They continue the same process. Well, I think they have, somebody has sent that mail that some protocols means instead some number they have made some jugglery like that. When you are starting first year, you need not a professor. You can even assistant professor is there. That's enough. Like for subjects like clinical subjects. Huh? And when they come to third year or like that, you should have associate professor. Then final year they said professor. Like that. I saw that somebody sent that PDF. I went through that. There's no change. Only they've said that like this, some modification. Instead of having all the staff first itself, difficult now. Even for anatomy also, they said that is mainly meant for private colleges to make it easy for them. You get a professor stuff now, so you start with assistant professor, then they'll manipulate and then they say something and go. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The rain was heavy?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Here it's okay, sir, in Visakhapatnam and Vijayawada. In Hyderabad, it's very heavy now, sir.
Vijayawada not much, huh?
Okay, sir.
In
But
Vijayawada, till yesterday afternoon, rainfall is heavy, sir, till yesterday afternoon. From then,
Yes, here 20 to 25 centimeters in most of the areas, Hyderabad, surrounding all those.
here 11 centimeters, sir, in Vijayawada.
I think it is higher. That's why all colonies are submerged and some washing out of scooters, cars.
Sir, road connectivity is lost, sir, to Hyderabad. Hyderabad Vijayawada highway has been it is
Also
flooded,
submerged with water and
submerged with water, and road has been cut off, sir. I mean, brakes have been came
oh,
to Hyderabad Bangalore highway also same.
difficult.
Yes, sir.
Only flight will be the best mode.
Yes, sir. In Vizag, one cargo ship has been came to shore, sir, by because of this high winds. Cargo ship is floating.
That might be anchor, no?
Yes, sir. They anchored in the middle of the sea, it seems. But anchor has been, I mean, it was.
Sufficient.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Sir.
Thank you.
Sir.